Okay, let's dive right into a really fascinating paradox today. We're looking at how a genuinely brilliant mind can somehow completely miss the mark on a profound spiritual truth. Welcome to this explainer. Today we're unpacking a concept that has confused scholars literally for centuries. We're talking about the core Buddhist concept of non-self, and we're going to map out exactly where the academics went so terribly wrong.
So we start with this gripping story from the text about a highly respected professor at Chi University. We'll just call him Dr. Yu. Now, this guy literally dedicated his entire earthly life to mastering Buddhist texts. He was famous, he published complete works, and he was absolutely convinced he knew every single thing there was to know about the Buddhist teachings. But here's the catch. The source describes a spiritual encounter where this very scholar, after he passes away, appears from a dark, lost realm in the afterlife. He's completely bewildered. He's crying out, "I researched so much, I studied so much, why don't I understand?" It's a striking paradox, right? How does a lifetime of academic mastery actually lead to spiritual darkness?
Well, to answer that, we're turning to our source material for today. Specifically, we're looking at Chapter 4 of a really profound Dharma talk given on March 4th, 1992, titled What is Non-Self? This text directly exposes the massive historical error in how non-self has been taught, and it traces that error all the way back through the history of Buddhism. It's basically a sharp, direct critique of over-intellectualizing things to the point where you lose sight of actual spiritual salvation.
Moving into Section 1, The Scholar's Fatal Misunderstanding and the Trap of Materialism.
You see, the exact academic trap that Dr. Ume, and honestly countless others, fell into was built on taking ancient wisdom just way too literally. Historically, scholars looked at the word non-self, which literally translates to having no self, and took it at absolute face value. Their logic went kind of like this. Okay, if the Buddha taught no self, then fundamentally there is no enduring individual ego. And if there's no ego, there can't be an eternal soul, so therefore, when you die, your soul must just extinguish. It decomposes into absolute nothingness. They basically concluded that the ultimate goal of enlightenment was self-annihilation.
But the text brilliantly points out the massive logical flaw in this academic theory. It asks a really simple question. If there is no soul, how on earth does reincarnation work? Think about it. If the self is completely extinguished at death, what exactly is the subject that's undergoing the cycle of rebirth? The source notes that even the Buddha's original disciples were terribly confused by this. They were wondering, wait, if we are non-self, do we just disappear when we die? It creates this huge contradiction in a belief system that is fundamentally built on the idea of a soul undergoing continuous training across multiple lifetimes. So the absolutely crucial point here is contrasting these two views. The academic view, when you take it to its logical extreme, actually turns into a hidden form of materialism. It's essentially saying, hey, this physical life is all there is. And the source points out that this has even led Western scholars to define Buddhism as a sort of materialistic atheism. But contrast that with the spiritual truth presented in the text. Humans are eternal, reincarnating souls undergoing training. This physical world is just a temporary school. Our scholar, Dr. Yu, was totally lost because his empty materialistic theories completely blinded him to the reality of his own soul's existence.
All right, on to Section 2, the true meaning of non-self. So, if non-self doesn't mean your soul just vanishes into thin air, what on earth does it actually mean? Well, this definition is really the key to our whole explainer today. Non-self doesn't mean you, as a spiritual entity, cease to exist. Rather, it means stripping away the demanding, selfish ego. The source states that your original existence is a being of light, created by the fundamental divine source of the universe. Non-self is actually the active practice of remembering that original pure state. You do this by letting go of worldly attachments and shaking off the illusion that anything in this temporary physical world truly belongs to you.
The mechanics of that attachment all start with a single, tiny concept, the word I. The source explains that I immediately generates the toxic idea of my things. You know, my possessions, my status, my brilliant ideas, and that breeds deep, deep attachments. The text emphasizes that to actually achieve non-self, we have to actively take a sword to this concept of my and mine, because if we don't sever these earthly ties, they literally become the chains that bind us to suffering, and exactly like our lost scholar, they keep us wandering around in the dark after we pass away.
Which brings us to Section 3, Uniting with the Divine.
Now, understanding the theory is one thing, right? But how do we actually practically empty ourselves of these attachments?
Thankfully, the text outlines a really clear three-step internal process. Step 1 is reflection. That means honestly looking at our own thoughts and actions to spot where the ego is at work. Step 2 is meditation, quieting the mind so we can detach from our physical senses. And step 3 is prayer. The text notes that the ultimate goal here is earnestly reaching out to realign and become one with the Buddha or that divine source. It's all about shifting your focus away from the tiny, demanding I and toward the vast, eternal divine. This passage reminds us of what you might call a beautiful kind of spiritual physics. You simply cannot be filled with light if you are already full of yourself. The text explicitly states that if the thought of myself is too strong, the divine light just cannot shine through. But when we successfully quiet those demanding egos through reflection and prayer, we create a vacuum. We essentially make room for the light of the divine to actually enter us and shine through us into the world.
Now for Section 4, Altruism as True Salvation.
You see, internal reflection is really only half the battle. To truly embody non-self, there absolutely has to be outward action. The text asserts that true non-self isn't just sitting all alone in quiet meditation, it is the active, lived practice of profound altruism. It literally means living for the sake of others. It means expanding your heart so much that you genuinely feel the pain of others as your own pain, and you share in their joy as your own joy. Because by dedicating your life to loving and serving others, you naturally stop obsessing over your own ego. By focusing outward, that selfish I just dissolves. And this brings us right back to our law scholar from the beginning of the explainer. This perfectly captures the absolute tragedy of his situation. He had all the text memorized, sure, but he completely missed the heart of the message. The source emphasizes the profound sadness of a human being who only studies religion intellectually. Gathering immense knowledge is entirely useless and actually spiritually dangerous if it just remains an abstract theory trapped inside your own head.
There's a quote here that brilliantly illustrates the core thesis of this entire 1992 text. It says, "Even if you build up empty theories and abstract arguments, they are nothing if they do not increase the happiness of people." I mean, that hits the nail on the head. Philosophy, religion, spiritual study, it has to actively save and uplift people in the real world. If it doesn't translate into love, into altruism, and into actual human happiness, the text argues that it is entirely meaningless.
So I want to leave you with a final thought and a bit of a challenge today, directly inspired by our source material. We've seen how a truly brilliant scholar got completely lost in the maze of his own intellect just by forgetting to actually live the teachings. So the question for you is, how can you take this ancient wisdom out of the realm of abstract theory today? What is one specific way you can apply love and altruism right now to break free from your own ego and actually increase the happiness of someone around you? Think about that for a bit. Thanks for joining me, and I'll see you in the next explainer.